Hey everybody, welcome to Wellness Week, September 2021. I'm health coach Dan Tribely, Epic Functional Medicine, joined by lovely Natalie Smith, health coach, Epic Functional
Hi.
Medicine. So you guys probably see us here and there in the comment feed in the community here, but welcome everybody. I hope that September's been treating you well so far. It's crazy how fast time flies. We were like, hey, past 2020 sort of, and it's like, hey, that this year is already like flying by. So uh,
Crazy.
yeah, for those of you guys, if you like the little bit of the cooler weather without it being too cold yet, I'm glad for you. I know I've been appreciating a little shift as well, as long as I don't think that winter's coming.
That's the thing. Yeah,
I
in
know,
Iowa here, yeah, we get maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks of fall, the perfect fall weather, and then
precious moment.
winter. So we're hoping for the best this year. See how it
Yep.
goes.
Well, if you guys have never watched these live or recorded or anything like that at all, you can always, we welcome comments to the discussion. Always makes it more interesting. Welcome, Melissa. Melissa is another coworker of ours here at Epic, helps on the administrative side and interacting, and also just always has great thoughts to share. So glad to have you join us. But we're going to, the topic of today, day one, it's kind of a fun mixed bag this week for September. I know in the past we have sometimes done an outline of, hey, we're just going back through the 5 pillars of EPIC, which we talk about our hydration, our diet, our level of movement and exercise, how well we're managing our stress day in and day out, and our sleep routines in a sleep environment. But we're going to do a couple things a little bit different. Today, we're going to talk about what are some of the a few examples of common popular approaches to making building habits. And then we'll talk about yoga for a couple of days because apparently September is yoga awareness month. How fun is that? And then I'll talk a bit more about sleep and routines with that. And then we'll wrap up with travel ideas when it comes to our meals and snacks. So all kinds of things. But today, just to start us off, like I just said a moment ago, I'm going to kind of talk about, how do we build better habits? And I know that's a question all of us have asked ourselves or somebody else at one point or another, if not multiple times. And there are tons of great self-help books out there and self-help articles. And if you're listening to this, maybe you read them all or have read many of them. And if you're like me, maybe you felt frustrated of like, I read all these good ideas, but I don't do any of it. So you're not alone. I think a big part of that is, reading something on its own or hearing about an idea on its own is powerless. It does nothing. It's when we hear an idea, we process it, and then we create a specific plan and see how that coordinates in our schedule. And so my hope with our discussion today is that, for those of you guys who watch and or listen to this, hear at least even one kind of new approach that is maybe practical for you. We're just highlighting a few, either from our own reading and incorporating that in our coaching, and just patterns we've, as we chat with our private clients, some of the things that they often like using that seem to stick more. So to start off, though, I do want to say for headspace and mindset, I know many of us can get discouraged when it comes to making new habits because we feel so entrenched in our current habits. We feel like we're somehow lesser people for it. Like, oh, I've got terrible willpower. I don't have good, I'm just not a disciplined person, apparently. I've tried changing, I can't. So I guess I'm just stuck. And I can just reinforce this, just feeling defeated, and we understandably take it personally. And so we think, it's not, it's hard to look at it objectively like, oh, that approach I used just maybe it wasn't the best for me. It's no, I apparently can't do this, and I suck or something. So so I want to speak to that a little bit. And I always find one thing I love about a couple of the books read when it comes to making new habits, making change in our lives, is when they speak a little bit to the science behind it, with brain, science relating to the brain, neuropsychology, and all that good stuff. And neurology. There we go. I was like, really trying to think of a word there. I'm like, let's make it too long for it. Just neurological studies. And one of the ones that come up a lot lately, it's not brand new by any means. I think this has been around. We've known this for some amount of time now, is the idea of to quote, and I don't know if this is an original quote by this person, but Donald Hebb, a neuropsychologist, says that neurons that fire together wire together. Yep. So you're like, yeah. It's like, it's a very popular saying in some books. Neurons that fire together wire together. So what that means is, neurons, the signals of our brain that, communicate to the body to do what we do. Those, the more that they turn on, that they're used, they fire. When repetition comes into play, it becomes stronger, it becomes more reinforced, and it more easily does that, more often wants to do that. So that can be a great thing when we are building good constructive habits for ourselves, because then it gets easier over time. When you practice something, it's the same idea. You get better at it because you're through repetition, trial and error, things get easier, more natural. It takes less conscious effort of, what am I doing again? How do I do this thing? To it just becomes automatic, right? But the flip side is that happens too with those bad habits or those deconstructive things in our lives. I think of it this way. I don't know if you guys are like me, maybe this is weird, but I always love watching, I don't see this often, but whenever you see, like, I don't know, you have like a smooth thing of sand or dirt, and then you have water, like a stream of water, something at the top, and then you see what path it trickles down and see what path it creates. I remember like way back, I don't know if it was 5th grade, I don't know what project we were doing, but it was some little science project or something. We're like studying these paths, and I don't know, I just find it very entertaining. But it's kind of, you have this somewhat fresh canvas, sort of this, sand, on a slope on a hill, and you've got dripping water or a stream of water or a hose or something that's going over. Well, it's going to follow the path of least resistance, water going down slope, gravity. It's going to go whatever the easiest way is. But that also then creates erosion. So now that water carved a path, and now that path is more defined. So the water coming behind it will even more easily want to stay on that path instead of veering on another part of the sand. And it's kind of a similar idea. It's like after a while, you have these very clear pathways, and the water's not going to go in any other direction. It is going there unless you do something intentional to break that path, and you create, draw on the sand a new one, right? So, so that's just a little bit about that. So the point, as I intro us off here, I want to share with you guys just for encouragement, is that it's not like you are somebody who might have, no willpower, or, you're just weak-minded or something. I think we all have a reservoir of will, and if it's always being drained, then there's nothing left of it. And when we can seek to not feel so drained, we can build that back up. And we can incorporate specific things to make building new habits and make our brain associate new things easier. So
I like the quote or line, basically, when you said the path of least resistance. And I think that's very relevant. Our brains will, they'll always try to take that path of least resistance. And again, just kind of hitting home that point is, it's not just you. That's why it can be hard to break old habits or create new ones, because our brain is so used to that path, and it doesn't take extra energy for us to veer off from that path. And so, like you said, we'll talk about some different tips, or I think just kind of next steps to help you on that new path. But again, it's not you. Our brains are creatures of habit, and just we've got to build some new pathways. And like Dan said too, as we practice it, it does indeed get easier. So yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You want to add something, Alyssa? I saw you unmute yourself.
Go for it. I honestly, like, my whole journey of self-healing totally began with that one quote that you started us out with. That's why I got so excited, because every time I start learning something new, whether it was going through the epic experience, right? And I remember learning about sleep at the end, and it was like circadian rhythm. Yeah, I've heard of that before. It's that when they fire together, they wire together. And I really took that as like, okay, so let's kind of, like I had talked about before, meaning, like, let's change the meaning about this, and what is sleep going to be good for, right? And as I move into like trying to figure out what practices work for me, because Epic offers like so many different ways and portals. Like you said, there can be yoga, breathing, what's right for you. What I try to do is like do it for a little bit of time and see if it feels good to my body. Like this walking without shoes on the grass, I started my whole Epic journey off just walking, and that was cool for me. I was like, yeah, you know, some people are doing this, some people are doing that, but walking. And I remember Dr. Bradley saying, that's actually really good. You know, walking is good. So I'm walking, but then without the shoes on, it's like, that really sits with me. And the more when I go for a walk, sometimes maybe if I don't want to, I always think about, you know, practice makes permanent, right? Like the eating of the sugar was like, I was practicing it every day. So it made permanent. Now the entry of the Epic smoothie, it's making it permanent. Like that's what my body naturally wants. So I think finding like all the ideas are so cool to hear. You're right. Like this works for you, this works for me, but really realizing that I'm not crazy. It just takes a minute. It takes a little bit of time to figure out what works for you, because your life isn't going to look identical to the other person's life. Right. And so it's that when I do these things, I always, my number one motivator is that what you said at the beginning, fire the neurons that fire together, wire together, because I want to focus on healing my brain next, is like, well, always. Right. And so I think about those grooves, like you said, like the old ones, like I always think about like, it's firing this way. No, Melissa, you're starting a new one, and you need to make that new groove in your brain. Right. And that's where it's going to fire and wire. And I just get so into it and visual. And I think about that one, and I always think about, oh, it's digging that new neural path, and I want that, and then I want it to fire along that path, and I visualize that just as I walk down the path, and I'm like, oh, I can go a little bit longer, because the more I do it, the more it fires together, the more it wires in, like, this feels good, this exercise, it feels good to my body, and it's that neural pathway that's being created. And then the more you practice it, the more that becomes your permanent. And so that's kind of what I got from your share, and I just love it.
Love it too. And I think it's that's one of the points that in a book that I'm sure we'll reference many times today, Atomic Habits by the author James Clear. You know, one of the chapters he says, you know, how long does it take to build a new habit? And many of you know, there's so many answers to that, like, oh, it takes 7 days, it takes 7 weeks, it takes. There's so many opinions. He's like, duration has nothing really to do with it per se. It's repetition. You know, if you can repeat it many times over a short period of time, you're well on your way to making it a new habit. But working on it, something, and you're inconsistent over a long period of time, you might not ever really find that rhythm. And I think of it like the best example in my life I can think of actually is learning to tie a tie, a dress tie. So my dad, you know, taught me multiple times. So I was in band, and so we'd have our concerts. For jazz band, we didn't have a set school uniform for jazz concerts. So we did for concert band, but not for jazz. So you just wore your own dress clothing. And so I'm like, oh, Dad, how do I tie this again? And you know, he's showing it to me, and so I'm like, oh, okay. But the problem was, it took me a while to learn it, because it would be every few months before that next concert where I needed to do that again. Too much time came by, and I forgot everything I learned. But then we had a jazz trip, a school trip, where we did I think 3 or 4 concerts all over a course of a weekend. So we were playing often, so I was getting dressed up often. And so I was doing it more times, and I got it down. I was like, oh, okay, I did it enough times that it became more ingrained. I could actually remember it. So very similar idea there. Yeah. So I think go ahead, Natalie. I was going to have you transition anyway.
Deal. And it, again, just another point from James Clear. So this is my favorite quote, probably one of my favorite quotes. I don't want to, anyways. The quote is, every action you take is a vote for the type of person you wish to become. Talks about no single instance will transform your beliefs, but as the votes adds up, so does the evidence of your identity. This is why habits are crucial. They cast repeated votes for being a certain type of person. And I think that's just a fun way to, kind of visualize it. But again, it proves that the more you're practicing specific actions on a consistent basis, it's again proving to your brain that these are the habits that you want, but also in a way proving to your brain that, this is the type of person you're working to be, if that makes sense. That seems a bit meta, but yeah, that's my favorite quote. One of my favorite quotes.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Natalie, do you want to transition us a bit to the idea of the growth mindset?
Yes. So the growth mindset, this is something that Dan and I have been talking about. We talk about it very often, but just in the past few weeks, I decided to look up like the actual definition because we talk a lot about it. And yeah, I just wanted, an actual definition. So this is what that is. It talks about in a growth mindset, people believe that their most basic abilities can be developed through dedication and hard work. Brains and talent are just the starting point. This view creates a love of learning and a resilience that is essential for great accomplishment. So I really like within the growth mindset, again, it doesn't, we don't already have to be good at something, or if we try something for the first time and it doesn't quite work out, that doesn't mean that's just the end all be all and we're like, well, whatever, on to the next. We have to kind of practice that and build that resilience, and having again that kind of big picture mindset that the things that you're doing on a day to day, and again, even those mistakes we can learn from and continually grow from those experiences, good or bad. I think that's, again, a big thing that we talk about often is just that growth, that type of mindset. Can be helpful, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just want to say real quick, a couple of things that came to me when you guys were talking is one thing I always like a little whisper to myself is always the way you do one thing is how you do everything. Right. So how I do one thing throughout my day is my intention behind, like, who I am is thrust upon that, and how I do one thing is how I do everything. Right. So I really think about that, and then trusting the process. Like lately I've just been thinking about like how, trust the process. But if I'm creating, cultivating, curating that process, so much easier to trust. Right. So making those choices ourselves, and then it's easier to trust. And, it's, if it can be, it's the Epic Five is Dr. Bradley and Rachel's creation. Right. But like, I'm choosing to do it each day. And so I'm creating that process. And so I'm way more likely to go along with it. And so those are just some things that came up for me.
No, I think it's a great point, Melissa. So to kind of like what you're saying, and help unpack that a little bit more. A lot of times, when we try to, like, we hear somebody else's idea of how to do something, we might want to follow along with that, but maybe there's something deep in us, like you said, that doesn't fully trust it. And so we don't, so therefore we lack some resilience. Like when Natalie mentioned the growth mindset, there's dedication, there's resilience. So when something doesn't quite go right, if we really trust the process, we have some resilience there of, it didn't work, I'm going to try again and try it a little bit different. Versus if we're lacking trust in an individual or in a process or something, and we're trying to follow along with it, then when something doesn't quite go right, we're like, well, I didn't really trust that anyway, and so I don't know if I want to keep going. And so what you're saying is, hey, when you are bringing your own unique self into how you want to approach that process, well, it's something you create in yourself. You trust yourself, or trust yourself more than others, and therefore it's easier to have more resilience. Yeah,
I think,
absolutely.
Yeah, kind of building on that too, which I'm realizing too wasn't even in our notes for today, but a big piece of building, whether you're trying to form new habits or break bad habits, is figuring out your why. And we've touched on it a couple times, but if you don't deeply connect to the reason that you want to make these changes or do these things, then it's less likely to be sustainable. I think having that, again, just as deep as you can get into the why of, why you want to do that, kind of dream in the future a little bit. If you were to make certain changes, what difference would that make? Why is that important to you? Again, kind of digging into all of those pieces. I think if you're not doing that and you're just setting, kind of some vague, unspecific goals, again, you might be a little less likely to be consistent with that. Yeah, that's kind of a long way to get to that point.
Definitely. Another area I wanted for us to touch on before we go into the practical, like, hey, what are the tips and tricks? I think this will probably go a little bit longer. Natalie and Melissa too. You cool if we go about 45 minutes, 40 minutes? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's 1:20 now. We're still talking about mindset. So don't want to skip on the practicals. So one other thing too that I want to bring up is like what place does small steps, small little habit changes versus like bigger shifts have like with each other. So to put it another way, you hear hear a lot of folks say like, hey, it's all about baby steps and little changes. And for others, are like, you need to do like cold turkey or make this big shift, and it's going to change your life, kind of thing. Well, which is better? And I think both have their place, but it's in different contexts. So at least, and this is just my own thoughts. I'm curious, Natalie and Melissa, your thoughts as well. But when I think of small habits, that is going to definitely be a helpful winner in the long term. And how long is long term? I don't know. Probably I would say more than months. 6+ months, a year. We're really long. And then because we get less done in, this is not a thought by me, somebody posted on Facebook and it was great. And I don't know who said it, but it went like this: we often get less done in a day than we think we can, but we get far more done in a year than we ever believed possible. You look back and you're like, holy cow, like so much happened this year and look at all we did. But how many of us have this massive to-do list in a day and we never meet up to it, right? And so long term, little bit done consistently over the long term can yield great results, more than we would believe possible. It's kind of the cliche but good metaphors of how do we get sandy beaches? It was waves crashing on rocks for years and 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 years. The wind erosion, water erosion break down mountains, even though those mountains seem like they can never break down. So I think, yeah, long term, but in the short term, those sudden big changes, for example, doing a cleanse or a detox for 3 to 4 weeks is probably the most iconic example I can think of within the realm of health and what we talk about here in the Epic 5 Plan community. Is there a value to that? And I know in my own life, and Mally, I think I've talked about this a number of times, is doing some bigger shifts for a short period of time is helpful because if it's long term, it's not practical, right? We can't sustain it. It's too much. But in a short term, I can put more energy, more of myself, more of my energy into it. And maybe I learned something new. I have a new little breakthrough that I wouldn't have quite gotten to had I been doing the baby steps, or it would have taken me a lot longer to get there, right? So I think both have their place, and it's not just one way is better than the other. So I was curious, actually. Hang on. I'm looking at our notes. There's another quote here. Oh, yeah. Okay. Here we go. So one more quote. This is a book called The Coaching Habit by Michael Stanier. He's a coach for busy man, at least at the time the book was written, for how busy managers can more effectively coach their employees and have it more of it be coaching rather than just, hey, do this, do that, and follow the rules kind of thing. He said, and basically he said something to the effect of, to paraphrase, the mind learns when it has a moment to reflect and think what just happened here, right? And so that's overall, when we're thinking about habits, going back to neuroplasticity, when we have a moment to process what we're actually doing and what the heck is going on in this moment, that's where learning happens. Just doing something for the sake of doing something, but doing it mindlessly, it's going to slip away. But when we process what's happening, or, oh, I feel, Melissa, you share, I feel a certain way, and I ate this or didn't eat this, it's sunk in and then deep in that groove, right? So that's just a general thing. But overall, though, just curious, Natalie, Melissa, you guys, any thoughts to that about long-term, like taking things baby step versus doing kind of sudden short-term changes?
Yeah, I would agree with all that you said. I definitely think there's a time and place for all, and just building specifically on kind of the long-term side of things. Something that we do in the clinic is we do have like long-term goals that we set for the year, but at the same time we take those long-term goals and we break them into quarterly goals. Then we take our quarterly goals and we break them into monthly goals, and then we take our monthly into weekly, and then we even have daily check-ins or things, intentions that we might set for a specific day. And I feel like yeah, it's been really helpful, because even thinking about if we didn't have like the quarterly or the monthly and we were just taking long-term into weekly goals, it would seem way more overwhelming. And also, yeah, there's just so much to do. So there's definitely a lot of different ways you can kind of break things down. But I mean, we even use that in our clinical setting too. So just wanted to throw in that little personal experience there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, for me, I like, Dan, that when you hit on the processing, like processing what went on, and one way I've really incorporated that lately, because I see the benefit to it, because a lot of us, well, me prior to getting into this healing journey, was rushing through life, like we talked about before, just rush, rush, rush. And it's that slow down. And I did so much in that amount of time. And I get reminders from Time Hop, and I look back and I'm like, wow, I've come a long way. My kids have grown up. These things have happened. But when you slow down and you like kind of take that time at the end of the day and journal, or even just think back, like I take a lot of screenshots throughout the day, and sometimes I'll just go back to my screenshots, and they'll be like quotes or like posts I like from people and things I learned throughout the day. And I'll kind of look at those and be like, what was I getting from this screenshot at the moment that made me save it? And then kind of expound on that. Like, what lesson does that kind of teach me about my life, or this incident that happened with my daughter and I today? Where did that really come from? Like, what did that really mean? Was it just kind of surface fight, or did we really get to the deep level of that? Because my relationships with my kids are important. And so, thinking about that, processing at the end of the day, and then saying, you know what, tomorrow I'm going to probably talk to her about that and wrap it up, because I don't feel like it really got resolved, and I feel like it was left on the surface. And so I just really want to highlight your point on processing the things that we go throughout the day, and just kind of taking that slow down time to really put the like close the loop, as Natalie says. Sometimes I like that, right? And close that loop, and then move on, because otherwise that stuff just adds up as like unfinished tasks in your head. And so the having the written down notes are neat too, and all that stuff, and it helps me get through my day. But at the end of the day, really taking that broader view of your day. What did I learn? What did I accomplish? And what still needs some attention for the next day, because it's important to me.
Yeah,
I love that.
I love the idea of like, this picture had meaning for you. Yeah, this picture had meaning for me today. Like, what do I think of that now? That's just an interesting idea. So thanks for sharing that.
I might have to do that too. And I agree that, that type of, however you can take time to reflect. I think, I mean, it's just, I feel like reflection is mindfulness in a way. Yeah. And so, allowing yourself that time, I think and it sounds like it's made an awesome difference too. So I love it. Thanks for sharing.
Definitely. Well, Nat, transition us to some of the practicals. Like, so what are the tips or methods that help people more often than not, to build some new habits? And you already started touching on one when you're talking about, Natalie, the breaking things down, like when we had yearly goals and they're quarterly and monthly and weekly and daily. And that's the idea of, start with small steps, right? And Melissa, I don't know if it was you that posted this or somebody did, but on one of the two groups we have, either a private client group or this Epic 5-Plan community group, somebody posted a picture. It was very simple, but it was such a great picture. So it said a lot in a little bit. It shows two people, same person, side by side, two ladders. One ladder had one rung every few feet, so it wasn't many at all. And you see the person like jumping up and can't even reach the first rung. And then the other one, same height ladder, they both reach the same destination. It just has more rungs in it, and so the person's just climbing right up, right? And I'm like, yes, there is a threshold, to, like you said, Natalie. Like, if you try to just, here's a month's goal, I'm just going to start working on it today, and it's just big. That is a rung with way too much gap between on how do I get that first month's project done. So I think that's just a great image of that. And again, just how can you just take this smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller? Whenever somebody has written an instruction manual for something, you break things down step by step, you realize you can take something very simple and it's got like 5 steps in it. When you really break it down, it's kind of ridiculous, but that's really helpful when you're going the opposite side, when you don't know how to do something. You're like, okay, how do I go step by step? Very helpful for those big long-term projects. Yeah,
I agree. It reminds me of, I think it was, honestly, I think I did it in high school and college, but there was basically like a how-to assignment and you had to write out how to do something. So some people did like how to, make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, or how to tie your shoes. And you have to be very specific. And then the, teacher or whatever, as you have it written, will act out those actions. And if you're not very clear by, when you said spread the peanut butter, like she could dip her hand in this peanut butter and spread it out. But regardless, the point I'm getting to is, it can be really, really helpful and help reduce overwhelm to break down those habits or break down those steps into, smaller pieces. So, you're not just overwhelming yourself with all that you could be doing. Instead, we're taking small planned out steps that, again, will naturally get us closer to whatever that end goal is. But it just made me laugh.
I think 2 common symptoms we can look out for if this is a helpful approach is, are you noticing like you're procrastinating a lot? And with that, procrastinating on this thing you need to get done. And somewhat tied in with that is you get this feeling of that's just hard. Like that just sounds like I don't know how, or that is difficult. Then breaking things down step by step will be helpful. Now, I will say with procrastination, there be a few reasons why we procrastinate. One can just be fear, right? Like, hey, I know how to do it and everything, but I'm afraid to for whatever reason. So, I mean, that will be important to distinguish, but if it's not so much something like that, and it's more of just the idea of like, I'm not sure how, or, it's just so much, that's very helpful. Go ahead,
I would
Natalie.
say like one tool to help you, get, just have a more clear like next step, or we often say goal or action step, however you want to word it. The SMART goal structure, otherwise we use smarter goals oftentimes, because with the smarter goal, of course, it has the regular, specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time bound, but it also has evaluate and readjust. And so I like that built-in kind of reflection there. But with a SMART goal structure, again, you're making it measurable, you're making it really specific, and then, you can make that even more specific into, different action steps. But that's something that we use often, is that smarter goal structure. And if you're not sure where to start, maybe, build your small step into a SMART goal to help you out there. Just a thought.
I gotta say, when I went through the EPIC program, I resisted the smarter goals because, for a lot of people, it just seems like overwhelming, and like to write it all down was not like where I was at in life. I was like just still moving at that fast pace, right? But like I was talking about earlier, when people tell you about what they do for their self-care and this and that, and you're trying to try things on for size. One thing I really am so happy that I did was, and it took some encouragement from Dan and reminders, but like I did do the SMART goals and smarter goals, and I did it with the working out part, where I do the as many reps as possible, or the downstairs, and we talked about like, where are you going to do it, when are you going to do it, what's your environment look like. And oh my gosh, like I'm so glad. It's almost like, if you're at like a festival and there's all these rides and you just don't really know if you want to go on this one ride. It's like, I'm glad I got on that ride of the smarter goals and gave it a go, because I'll buy a ticket and go again. It works. But you got to make it work for you, is what I realized. Like when I hear other people talking about it, I was just so like, oh, it seems like too much work, but really it's a way. And when we're all learning how to like self-love and spend this time with ourselves, it's really a way to get to know yourself and what you like and what process is going to work for you. Like right. Dan has a different place that he likes to do his workouts. Natalie, a different style of workouts, probably maybe yoga. But for me, doing that SMART goal and giving it a try, and first of all, taking that little bit of time for yourself, number one. Number two, it's getting 1% better a day, because even sitting down and looking at SMART goals and some examples of them is a step in the right direction.
Yeah.
It's just saying, hey, what do other people do? What do their goals look like? Oh, wait, I think that's pretty easy. Wait, SMART. And then you kind of get it. And so just giving it a go, just trying out that ride is, you never know if you'll like it till you try it. And I think that's kind of what we want to, like, what we're trying to get here too, is like, just try it, and sometimes we make things to be bigger than they are in our heads. Sometimes they are bigger than they are once we try it out. But yeah, just that, like, I'm so happy I did, because I pulled out that smarter thing a lot lately when I'm trying to get my house in order or figure out certain things. I'm like, you know what? It just seems so unattainable. I'm just going to go to these smarter goals, and I'm going to just sit down, give myself that time and that like self-love and that self-care, and just go through and make one. And then once you've actually taken the time to make your SMART goal, you're going to do it because you took the time to create it, right? Like, you're not just going to go halfway. And that's how you feel when you start anything. More than like, you're going to go for longer. So I'm glad I did that.
Yeah, I think, and actually I'll let you explain, Dan. I think it really helps, and that's why, like, us as health coaches, like, we're trying to eliminate as many like potential variables, or I don't know if that was the right way to say it, but basically we want you to get as close to that, like, that plan or that intention. We want to help you get specific as possible. So like you said, when are you going to do it? Where are you going to do it? If you're watching a video, where are you going to find that video? When are you going to find that video? And just, it makes it easier for you. So if you set the time at 4 p.m. on Tuesday to work out, you don't get to 4 p.m. on Tuesday and you're like, oh, shoot, like, my environment's not ready. I don't know what I'm going to watch. And then you're more likely just to not do it that day. But Dan, I told you, I literally just said, I'll let you explain it, and then explained half of it without saying what it is. So I'll pass it to you. You can bring it home.
We have a flow and an outline, but there's no like, it has to be, spoken a certain way. So that's great. No, I think, so in this discussion, what you guys have been describing is a perfect exact example of another tip for building healthy habits, which is implementation intentions. So we have I have a link for you guys. Takes to the website of James Clear's website. He has an excerpt from his book talking about this. So if you guys participate in the comment or the question of the day, we'll get all those resources and the link references to you guys. And what he talks about with implementation, so basically every implementation intention is a part of a SMART goal. Not every SMART goal is an implementation intention. So implementation intentions are when you get very clear on not just the what, but the, like Melissa and Natalie, what you're saying of where am I going to do this thing? How much time will I spend doing it? And how frequently will I do it? So a classic, a really good example that fits that approach nicely is with exercise of like, where am I going to do that exercise? Like Melissa, you said, do I have an environment for that? If I'm going to do it at home, do I have a space in my home to do it in the first place, right? How much time do I want to spend doing that? Am I going to do 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 30? How many times a week? So how frequently, right? And the last component I forgot is, when. So what time in that day are you going to do it? So when you get very specific like that, it really helps a lot. Actually, it makes crystal clear. A lot of times we can make like I think Melissa or Natalie, when you said, you have this intention or this thing you want to do, and then suddenly, more than half the week's gone. You're like, oh shoot, I just remembered it, right? Because it really wasn't a plan of how you're going to break it down throughout your week. And so, in a study, it was like looking at a couple of groups of people who were going to do some more exercise. You had one group that said, okay, your goal, exercise, 4 times a week, have at it. That was basically it. You had another one where they worked on motivation and some of those things, right? And reasoning, why you want to do this. And then you had one where they did the motivation stuff, right? And that worked, but then they added in just that moment of taking 5 minutes, right? Or 2 minutes to just think those few details. And the difference between those two groups, both had the same level of motivation, all that stuff, was night and day difference. So again, it's that taking that moment of mindfulness ahead of time, so that when you get to that point of, I'm going to do this thing, you're not trying to then start from scratch going, how am I going to do this and where am I going to do it? Because it just creates enough mental resistance that you just skip it and say, I'll do that later. I'll do that tomorrow. I'll do that tonight. So implementation intentions, that's a specific way you can go there. With that, I was going to say, I'll mention,
Go for it.
Natalie or Melissa, I'd love for if one of you guys want to share like what habit stacking is. So that can be a way to figure out like what time in your day you're going to do something. Love for one of you guys who want to share, talk about that. But go ahead first, Natalie. You're going to say.
What was I gonna say? Along with implementation and oh my gosh,
I know, right?
implementation intentions. Did I say? I think I said it right that time. Also another way that they can relate to the smarter goals. Again, the is evaluate and readjust. I think just a point that I want to get across is, let's say you set that implementation intention, you've been super specific, and you get to that time and you find out my kid has a game or something, so it's not going to work out, or whatever comes up, because life happens and sometimes our initial plan will not work out. It's just life. It's, nothing personal. It's just life. But what we can do, we have the power and the control to evaluate and readjust if we need to. So let's say, all right, that 4:00 time that I planned for, just, I get into my week and it's not actually a realistic time for me. So I'm going to adjust and, try something else. And again, it just takes some experimentation. And like Melissa said, it takes some time and effort to figure out what works best for you and how you want it to be structured. So don't be afraid to move things around if it's going to help you stick to it more. So, which also nice transition into the habit stacking there too. So one example that comes to mind with habit stacking is HIIT workouts and something else that you can stack it with. But the premise of a habit stack is to take something that you're already doing, something that's already consistent in your day, and stack a new habit either before or directly after that. And one example that comes up that a few of my clients have done is with HIIT workouts. So high intensity interval training, the Tabata version is specifically what we're talking about, which is a 4-minute HIIT workout. And a couple of my clients have habit stacked that right before their shower. So, again, we did the implementation intention and figured out, the specific workout that they were going to do. And then again, just before they get into that shower, they do their 4-minute workout, go, shower, continue with their day. And again, just having that stacked along with something that they're already consistently doing helped them to, continue with that consistently in their day-to-day, which is just one example. There's a lot of other ones too. So maybe you guys can build on that too.
Yeah. So I think, go ahead, Melissa.
Well, okay. I was just going to tell you one that I started implementing recently, and it's interesting because I really like the habit stacking, but I had to get really have some habits first, right? And so I'm working on that. But one cool thing I started doing is, for Epic, I add people onto Facebook, right? Go through the stuff. And so between each person, I want to get it done in the morning so I don't forget about it and time gets away from me at night. So it's the first thing I do when I log into work is do that. And I also, the first thing I do in the morning is always drink my water. So I thought, let's add these two, because sometimes I would get this big thing of water filled up and I just I don't pick it up and drink it. So what I do is I want to work on my memory. And I want to be intentional about the people that I meet. And so as I'm entering one person into the computer, I will intentionally say their name in my head and sometimes out loud. And then I'll add them, and then I'll try to remember what their name was, just to connect that memory. And then after I'm wrapping up, entering that one person into our system and adding them to our Facebook group, I take 4 or 5 sips of my water. Right.
Perfect.
And sometimes there's 30 people that I'm entering. Sometimes there's 70. Sometimes it just depends. But each person, I'm taking that moment to work with my brain and the memory of the name, intentionally add them to our system because everybody's important. Right. And I want to put that energy behind what I'm doing. And then to add the water in, it's just I'm done with this whole thing every morning. And that's basically half of what I want to get in a day. And so, yeah, it's just really, that habit stacking is so cool. And you could do it in like, that's just one idea of what I've done. But like, I really try, like when I'm cleaning the bathroom, I like to do that because then I get done quick and it's, oh, look at, it's that visual, ooh, I did it, instant gratification. But I always check like toilet paper rolls, and I'll check underneath the sink to make sure we have the stuff we need. And that's huge for somebody like me who just never cleaned the bathroom before. But I mean, it's those adding those extra things in where it's like going to benefit you later. And also if you're doing something that's fun, that's something else to say is like, if it feels good to you, like this walking feels good to me, you're going to just love doing it. And then when you add something on top of that, like say you added drinking water before you went on a walk or when you came home, I mean, it's just adding something on to something you already enjoy doing. It'll help you enjoy doing that thing and help you put that energy of like, I love walking and into I love drinking my water. And then that good energy consumes you and it's exciting. So yeah, connecting something to something you're doing that already fulfills you helps you, really have gratitude for what you're doing on top of that, right?
So, I hadn't thought of it that way. Yeah, like, hey, if there's something that serves a purpose and you have this appreciation for that, both in an intellectual, emotional level, or further beyond that, and then you can maybe have that carry over into that new thing that maybe you don't have that same kind of sense and feeling for. Those are great examples, guys. Thanks for sharing. So the advantage of habits, two advantages of habit stack in particular, using this tool as a way to help you remember. I think that's the big part of making new habits is just remembering, right? It's like, oh, I forgot to do that thing and now it's too late. Oh, that half the battle, I think, with making new habits is having an effective reminder system that you actually pay attention to and heed. And so the habit stacking naturally does that because, like you said, you have that thing you already remember to do. Something that's ingrained nice and well in your mind. And so it increases the odds of remembering, oh yeah, I was going to do that thing too, because this is a cue. My brain's creating this new cue, an association. The other advantage of habit stacking then is when you have a schedule that you have some things you can count on happening in your day, but not necessarily to the minute. And that's helpful too. If you can't count on work ending at 5, maybe traffic ebbs and flows. Well, then instead, when I get home, I will do blah, 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 So that's more effective. So depending on how a person's schedule is built, scheduling something and having a clock time reminder might be more helpful, or maybe not if, it's like, hey, I'm not home yet. Just in that example, your alarm goes off. Well, I'm not home yet. You disregard it. You get home and you forgot. So that's a couple of specific instances in which habit stacking especially can be a relevant tool for you guys. I'm going to chat about categorization, and we'll start kind of wrapping up our time for the day. I know we're going a little longer. So
that's okay.
One thing that in terms of this is sometimes there's so much we want to do. We're overwhelmed. We already talked about baby steps a little bit, and this is somewhat related. But I don't know, maybe unintentionally, but a pattern I noticed even in the workshops that we do as health coaches with our private clients here at Epic is I noticed in our workshops when we talked about movement or stress management, sleep, et cetera, is a lot of times what we were doing was basically just reviewing core fundamentals and breaking them down into pieces or into categories. And then it was like, hey, what's your next step? Let's just pick one of those. And so, for example, when we talked about exercise, instead of, oh gosh, I need to move more in general, holy moly, it was, well, let's get, some intentional movement each day and do some hits during the week, a couple sessions of strength training, a little bit of flexibility, mobility. And so we broke things down to 4 or 5 things. Hey, what's one thing that you want to focus on next and taking a step toward? Stress management, we talk about some stress management, right? Sunlight and things, connecting with others. So oxytocin, meditation, mindfulness, exercise. Again, it was like, okay, we've talked about these 4 things. What's one thing you want to focus on? One more example, sleep. It was like, we have this handout we go through and it's like, here's like 20 different things, little facets that help expand our sleep. What's 1 or 2 of that list an opportunity? And so it really is this categorization and then select. And I think that can help when you know that you have a lot of things that you need to be doing better with, but it feels just somewhat unclear or just kind of big. That's a way to break it down into steps, is sorting through what are the categories that make up my movement, health for my movement, health for my stress, and for my sleep. So anyway, that's just kind of a way of thinking through things that can maybe help land you into breaking down something more easily, instead of just kind of starting from scratch and going, well, movement, oh gee, there's a lot there. And the next thing you know, you try to do a movement plan that does everything all at once, and maybe that's not practical, you know. So I just want to give some lip service to that. Before we kind of start wrapping up for our time today, I'll do kind of a summary, but Natalie, Melissa, anything else you want to add to that, or other things we chat on today?
I would just say, one, if you haven't read or looked into James Clear's Atomic Habits, even if you don't get the book, on his website, he has basically his whole book broken down into different specific articles. So again, that'll be in our guide. So if you answer our question of the day, you'll get all of those links, and you can just go to jamesclear.com as well. But we've got some other stuff included in our guides. Anyways, but I just want to encourage you guys to, you know, figure out what that small next step is. Again, you know, we can consider our long term, and don't be afraid to dream a little bit. So think again, like a year from now, or, you know, even more shorter term, like 1 month from now or 2 months from now, what changes would I like to see? But also, why do I want to see those changes? What difference would that make in my life? And yeah, just pick one small next step, and then you can always build on it from there. And again, remember that you have the power and control to change up your initial plan if you need to. It's not a failure if it doesn't work out the first time. You just learned, okay, maybe that's not, you know, the way that works best for me. And so don't be afraid to experiment a little bit, you know, in your road to figuring out what is, you know, what does work for you, you know. And again, life happens. So what works for us this month might not work for us in 2 months. So don't be afraid to switch things up if you need to. So that's all I got.
I like that, Natalie. And what I would add to that is everything that you said, and then taking that time to slow down, really celebrate yourself. And if you're having a hard time thinking like I was about small steps equal big things, or small steps, you know, little things each day will equal, you know, great things, is, you know, go back and look at some of the things that you have created in your life and take a moment to just celebrate that. Like, maybe it's a birthday party you put together for your kid, and it all turned out well. Like, any small thing that turned into something big, give that some time and think and just celebrate. And when you do make that small like move, you make it down to work out that day, just, even though it feels like we're adults and we should, you know, celebrate that, because that's the part I've been missing for 40 years is giving myself the credit and celebrating and saying, hey, you did this small thing. It's 1%, which is great compared to the 0% you were at before. And nobody is 100%. So heck yeah, celebrate that 1% every day. And I love it. And what Natalie said and what I said, and just do it all, because that's what we're here for, right? Like, it's so awesome. So yeah, definitely celebrate.
All right, guys. Well, good discussion today. As Natalie said, our question of the day is, if you have a big goal in mind, what's the first small step to take? Or how can you break that down to smaller steps? And the challenge of the day for you guys is pick one of the methods we discussed and give it a try this week. So we talked about habit stacking. We talked about implementation intentions. We talked about breaking down something that's huge into smaller pieces. And so we'll wrap up for there, guys. Tomorrow we'll be joined by Natalie will lead the charge here, and whoever else, maybe Melissa or somebody else in the team. And we'll be chatting on yoga day 1. So stay tuned. I may or may not be around the rest of this week. We've got baby number 2 coming. Today's the due date. Baby's not come yet. So we're just kind of on high alert. So we will see you next time, and take care, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, guys.